Shavua Tov. I'd like to share with you another one in our halachic series of what to do. Another story based upon the writings of Rabbi Silverstein taking place in Israel. And that starts off with Ruvain, who is sitting at his desk. He has a business going. He produces at least this slice of the business in terms of the question that came up. He produces CDs for business events, for social occasions, for simchas, for fundraisers. He mass copies material submitted to him by the people who have the rights to the material. And he gets a phone call. It's a little bit filled with some tension, because it's the head of a tzedakah organization, and established with a good reputation. They are having a Chanukah Tabayit. It's actually somewhat of a connection to this week's parsha, because in the parsha we have the Nisim, the presidents of the tribes, participating in the Chanukah Mizbech, in the dedication of the altar in the Mishkan, just after it was set up. So this organization was merited to having a new building, and having a special event and dinner to celebrate the new building. And sort of close to last moment, the organization decided that they would give away a CD of very upbeat, happy songs to help celebrate the Chanukah Habayit of the new quarters of this organization. So they submit to their order. They need 200 copies. They ask him to produce the cover, which is part of his business, to make it very upbeat and colorful, and to use the songs that they had prepared for the album. Fine. Because of the timing of it, they didn't give so much time to the order. He committed himself to getting to them, but he would deliver it to the Simcha Hall in time for distribution to the guests. Not so much later, he gets a second pressing order from a family, unfortunately on a different aspect of the spectrum of occurrences in life, but a family who is in the Shloshim for, if we identify him as a grandfather in the family, a Rav. His name is not given, but I'm going to give him the name Gold. So Rav Gold is his name. And they are preparing for the Shloshim, and they had recorded the hespeds, eulogies that were delivered at the funeral, and the eulogies that were given during the Shiva, and they put them on a CD, somewhat of an illustrious person, and they were going to distribute this CD to all those that gathered in the shul for the Shloshim observance. And again, because of the timing, this fellow Ruvain committed to meet the deadline, but to deliver the CDs to the synagogue. Now, you may get the drift of where this is heading. I think they say in French, Afsalachis, the messenger that was sent to deliver each order, well, he sort of did what he was told to do, actually. But it turned out that when the dinner was over, so it's a good lesson, always preview something. In this case, they didn't show it, they didn't air it, but they did distribute that CDs. When the dinner was over, Shimon, the head of the tzedakah education, popped the CD into his player, and all of a sudden, he's hearing a hesped for this Rabbi Gold. And people are crying and weeping through their praise and reflections. And what happened in the factory is that they put the wrong cover on the CD. Because each CD of the Hesped's got this colorful, upbeat overlay that had to do with the simcha of the Chanukah Habayit of the Chesed institution, and the family who was going to be distributing their CD at the Shloshim, which was on the same night, got their cover of a picture of the deceased and his tombstone, and upbeat music. So that was the mix-up. And at night, Shimon, the head of the Tzedakah organization, when he realizes what's on his CD, and he has the cell phone number of Ruvain, he calls him up, Ruvain answers, and Shimon starts saying, don't you have any degree of responsibility? Do you know what you just done to me? You ruined me. Here I have my donors who helped to pay for this new building, and we had this dinner, and we distributed it out, amidst, fanfare and happiness. We distributed this CD, and when they start popping in that CD, and they're going to hear crying and wailing, and I spayed them, what did you do to me? And Ruvain, he's very apologetic, but Shimon doesn't want to hear any of it, and he hangs up the phone. About an hour later, Shimon gets another phone call on his cell, and caller ID shows that it's one of his biggest contributors, who made a very, very nice donation to this building. And Shimon has to take the call, but he's bracing himself. And the first words from this donor come out and says, where did you get the Hespedim from? Where did you get those eulogies for Rabbi Gold? And Shimon is trying to defend the mix-up, and he starts to apologize, and the donor doesn't give him a second to apologize. He says, I can't believe these are so meaningful to me. When I was a teenager, my father passed away, and I was angry with God. I was angry with the world. I gave up most of religion. I was emotionally bruised, and Rabbi Gold hooked up with me. He was makarev me. He brought me closer back to Torah, and he was like a father to me. I was close to him. For many, many, many years, we were so close. And until today, I know that certain aspects of my personality, my actions are all influenced by Rabbi Gold. You have no idea how important to me it was to hear these Haspedim. And he says, I didn't even know that Rabbi Gold died. We really haven't been in touch for the last few years. But in speaking to you now, I want to share with you that because of the reflections that I just underwent listening to some of these eulogies, which were so accurate, there was like no exaggeration, and I realized how great this man was, and also very humble, and what role he played in my life. I am going to make another contribution. And in the printed document that I'm reading, it doesn't make mention of how much money, but when the check showed up the next day by hand delivered by a messenger, the check surpassed the amount raised by all of the other people together at that dinner celebrating the dedication of that new house, the new office space. So now Shimon had a question, because the CD distributor had told him right away that he would reimburse him and even pay him some damages. And he made an electronic payment through the organization's website. As soon as he had hung up the previous night, as soon as he had hung up with Shimon, he transferred all the funds paid to him for the CDs, and made a very nice contribution in addition, specified as damages. So now Shimon, who is an Erlich Hayid, goes to ask the question as to whether or not he's allowed to keep that money or should refund that money. Now, some of you might have been in shul several months ago, even months before we closed down our shul-based activities. Between Mincha and Mariv one week, we studied a related question. A grandfather was so ecstatic with his first grandson being born. The family named him Yosef, and as soon as the name was known, the grandfather went out and bought a very expensive Kiddush cup, and then took it separately to an engraver to engrave the name Yosef on it. When the grandfather came to pick up the kos read Yosef Chaim. That wasn't the boy's name. The boy had one name, just Yosef, and the engraver made a mistake and wrote Yosef Chaim. So the grandfather was very disappointed. Obviously, he was a mensch. He didn't make the biggest deal about it, but he didn't pay the engraver for the mistake. And he took the cup home, and with a heavy heart, he hid it in his closet. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, his grandson, the baby Yosef, became very seriously ill. And when he wasn't recuperating to the doctor's expectations, the family changed his name. And they changed his name to Yosef Chaim. They added the name Chaim, and they added it second. Not first, they added it second. So the Kiddush cup was perfect right now. And when the baby recuperated, Baruch Hashem, the grandfather brought over the Kiddush cup with the biggest smile on his face, so happy he was able to give the Kiddush cup. And then he went to ask the Shaila whether he has to go pay the engraver now for what was a mistake, but now is actually very accurate and brought the grandfather much delight. So Rabbi Silverstein answered him, and he said, at the time that you picked up the Kiddush cup, the engraver was guilty of negligence. I mean, not intended negligence, but it was negligence. He did not fulfill the mission that he gave to you, and you owed him no money for his work. That's it. You owed him no money. The fact that a few weeks later the situation changes and the cup becomes accurate does not invalidate the psak din that was valid, the halachic ruling that was valid originally. It's not undone. At that time, it was the right thing to do. So now the question is our case with the mixed up CDs, is it analogous for Shimon? And when it comes to the family, Reuven called the family that was mourning the loss, explained to them the mix up, and agreed to get them new CDs, and that was all taken care of. But the question with whether the Chesed organization owes Reuven and his CD company money now, because it turned out that not only did he not lose money as much as we could see, but he got this windfall because of this mix-up. So Shimon wants to know, should he return the money? And the question is the case of the cup a model for this or not? So Rabbi Silberstein says no. He quotes himself, with the case. He ruled on the case with the Kiddush cup. So he quotes that case, but says they're not analogous. Because by the Kiddush cup case, there was an overt, obvious damage. The cup was supposed to read Yosef, and it read Yosef Chaim, and the cup is somewhat damaged because of that. Even if you erase the names, there'll be the cup will change to reflect some of the erasure and how you have to go over it to fix it. So there was real damage, and that was a claim. But here by the dinner, there was no real damage that the recipients of those CDs would stop funding the organization. Certainly at the time, nobody asked for a refund, for their pledge because they walked away with a surprising CD. they'll either figure out on their own that there was some kind of mistake, or they'll think that not the most appropriate, it should have been more happy, but all right, they gave us something that's not so available in the market. There's no evidence that there's any loss. So Rabbi Silverstein did rule that the Chesed organization should return the money that was paid by Ruvain in an attempt to compensate. Of course, in the end, it turned out more than better for the organization, and there was no real damage to justify the claims. That really was more goodwill by the proprietor of the business. So it is an example of how we can't always judge something by our first glance, and sometimes, even though the time frame in this particular story was just a matter of an hour or two before it turned into a great story, sometimes it could take much longer to realize certain benefits in what initially looks to be difficult. But life is complex, and what meets the eye is not always what really is the reality. I'm going to unmute us as I wish us all as I wish us all a Shavua Tov. Rabbi Kane, there's a request on the chat that you